Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is spring. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we can use this verb. The first way you might hear the verb spring used is to mean to move or jump suddenly or rapidly. Generally, that movement or jump is either upward or forward. A second way we can use the verb spring is to mean to appear or develop suddenly or unexpectedly from something. We'll look at that a little more closely with phrasal verbs in just a second. A third way we can use the verb spring is to mean to bring about the escape or release of a prisoner. This is a bit informal, and you might hear this in movies as part of dialogue, someone trying to break out or escape from prison. You might also see it in literature as you read as well. You should know that spring is an irregular verb. To make the progressive tense, we're going to add ing to form springy. The past tense form of this is going to require a spelling change. We're going to change the I in the base verb to an A to form sprang. To form the participle, we again are going to change our vowel to a U now and form sprung. Now, I've had so many students over the years tell me how hard it is to memorize irregular verbs, and I agree. There are so many to keep track of. But one thing that can be helpful is if you can sort of group some verbs together that have similar patterns. So spring, sprang, sprung. Our pattern there is I, A, U, and that happens with the verb sing, sing, sang, sung, swim, drink, and maybe some others. So if you can kind of group those together, try and memorize them together, that's one way to make learning these irregulars a bit easier. Now, let's take a look at some phrasal verbs with spring. I just have four different phrasal verbs for us to look at today, but a few of these have a couple different meanings. The first one we're going to start with, spring back, is one that has multiple meanings. The first way you might hear spring back used is to mean to return something to its original position. Let's take a look at that. Here it is in an example sentence. When you get up, the foam springs back to its normal shape. So this particular sentence could be referring to some type of mattress or cushion or pillow, and the idea is when we sit on it, right, and kind of pushes it down, and then when we get up, it returns to its original position. A second way to use spring back is to mean to recover completely and quickly. Let's take a look at an example sentence. The volleyball player sprang back after her ankle injury and played last night. This implies she recovered quickly. She didn't miss a month of games in her season. The next phrasal verb we'll look at is spring for. It means that one person is treating another person by buying them something. Let's look at an example. Imagine someone saying, I'll spring for dinner. Where do you want to go? So the person speaking is suggesting that they are going to be the ones buying dinner, and it's meant as a treat or a gift for another. The next phrasal verb we'll look at is spring from. This can also have a couple different meanings. We'll tie back a bit to some of the earlier definitions we looked at. The first way you might hear spring from used is to mean to appear suddenly and rather unexpectedly, so you didn't see it coming. Here's an example. A cat sprang from the bushes as I walked by. So I wasn't expecting a cat to jump out of the bushes. Spring from can also mean to be the cause of something. Let's look at an example. The legislation springs from several court cases. This is something that happens. It's kind of a big legislative time, both in our national government right now and for many state governments as well. The idea is that sometimes people don't like the outcome of certain court cases. They decide, okay, we're going to make new laws that will prevent a similar outcome in the future. So in many ways, the outcome of a particular court case affects or causes there to be new legislation. The last phrasal verb we'll look at is spring up. It also means to appear suddenly. Here's an example. New businesses have sprung up throughout the pandemic. So many people, because they have been laid off or their hours have decreased due to the pandemic, have decided they're going to start their own businesses in order to support themselves and their families. Now, let's continue doing some practice with our verb spring. Today, we're going to focus on the past progressive and the simple future using be going to. Let's start with the past progressive. We generally use this verb tense to describe an action that was ongoing. Could be over the course of a period of time. We might also show that one action was ongoing when another action interrupted. That interrupting action is generally in the simple past tense. To make a past progressive affirmative statement, we're going to use a past form of be. So if my subject is you, we, or they, we'll use were. If my subject is I, he, she, or it, we'll use was. And then we're going to use that ing form of the verb. Here's an example. The basketball player was springing all over the court during the game. So this implies jumping, moving forward, maybe upward as well, a lot. So what I envision with this sentence is someone who was really energetic and very engaged in the game. Now, if you want to make a negative past progressive sentence, all you need to do is insert not after our be verbs. You might hear some people use the contractions wasn't or weren't. That's fine. If it's more comfortable for you, though, to keep it two separate words in was not, were not, that's fine as well. Here's an example. The kids weren't springing out of bed after staying up late. Okay, so this idea, they're not ready to get up, right? They probably felt tired. If I want to make a yes or no question in the past progressive, I want to start with my be verb. So that's going to be was or were, since we're in the past. Then I'll have my subject. My subject needs to match with that form of the be verb. Then I'll have that ing form of the verb. Here's an example. Was he springing back from his surgery before the infection? So again, this is going to recovery, someone healing after surgery, and then unfortunately another action interrupted it, someone catching another infection or illness. Now let's look at making simple future sentences using be going to. You know, there are many different ways we can express future tenses in English. We tend to use be going to express facts, things that will be true in the future. We use it to make predictions, and we also use it to describe our own plans. So to make a sentence in the simple future using be going to, I'm going to use a present form of be. That's am, is, or are. And I'm going to use going to and the base verb. Here's an example. This weekend, we're going to spring forward with the start of daylight saving time. So if you're in the United States, this is, but not in Arizona and maybe one other state, what you will do Saturday night, hopefully before you go to bed, is turn any manual clocks ahead 1 hour. And that's daylight saving time, which will then continue on to either late October or early November. Now, if you want to make a negative sentence for the future using be going to, we need to insert not again after our be verb. You can make contractions with is not, make it isn't, or are not, make it aren't, but you can't make a contraction with am. Here's another example sentence. The cruise industry isn't going to spring back from the pandemic. Now, some of our earlier sentences with spring back have focused on people recovering from illnesses, injuries, etc. But we can also use it to talk about a business recovering or some other entity. You'll see that also here in the yes or no question in just a second. To make our yes or no question, we want to start with a form of be in the present tense. That form is going to be whatever our subject is. And then we'll, again, follow the pattern of going to and then the base verb. Here's an example. Is the economy going to spring back? Is it going to recover? Finally, let's take a moment to look at some words and phrases that are related to our verb spring. And the first word we're going to look at is just the noun form of this word. So same spelling, same pronunciation. This noun form can have a number of different meanings. We're going to look at 3 of them. So especially if you hear people use the word spring right around now, they are likely using it as a noun to refer to the season that comes after winter but before summer. So if you're in the northern hemisphere, kind of the northern half of our planet Earth, this is generally March to May. But if you live in the southern hemisphere, that's September to November. That's your spring. So an example of this usage could be, I have bad allergies in the spring. True statement. I was sneezing a great deal just before I made this video. A second way you might hear the noun spring used is to refer to a metal coil that can either be pressed or pulled, but it's going to return to its shape whenever you release it. I've got a picture here to kind of help illustrate this. Metal coil, here we go, are these little pieces here. You can imagine someone either pulling it or pushing it together, but as soon as you let go, it's going to return to its original shape or form. An example of this noun in a sentence could be, mattresses have hundreds of springs. Again, sometimes spring, coil are used interchangeably. A third way we can use the noun spring is to refer to a place where water wells up from some underground source. Okay, so I have another picture here to kind of illustrate what that might look like. An example of us using this in a sentence could be, we drank from a spring on our hike. So we were out and we found some clean, clear water that was coming up from the ground. The last thing we're going to look at today is the phrase to spring a leak. What all this means really is a leak is developing. I imagine this phrase originated with the idea of it appearing suddenly, unexpectedly, and sometimes that the water might feel like it's jumping out from the hole or other area that it's coming from. So an example of this phrase could be, the boat sprang a leak. And that can be quite serious, could lead to the boat sinking, which hopefully won't happen. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.